Hey guys, tonight we crawl out of bed in the dead of night, not in your cozy room with glowing LEDs and a memory foam mattress, but in a damp, pitch-black stone cell where your blanket feels more like a burlap sack and the air stings your nostrils. You're not alone. There's a dozen other souls stirring to life around you. But no one's speaking. Just the rustle of robes, the creak of straw, and somewhere in the distance, a bell that refuses to let you rest. Loud, echoing, insistent. It rings not just through stone walls, but through your bones. You fumble upright, muscles sore from sleeping on what can only be described as a medieval IKEA reject. There's no time to gather your thoughts. That bell means one thing. It's time for matins, a sacred midnight ritual. And whether your soul is ready or not, your body has no say in the matter. You blink, breathe, and brace yourself for the dark walk to the chapel. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, tell me your location and the local time. Just drop it in the comments. I love seeing how far and wide these nighttime trips reach. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's the year 1253, give or take. You're tucked away inside a Benedictine monastery in the English countryside. The place smells of damp stone and candle wax, maybe a faint hint of boiled turnip from yesterday's supper. Outside, the sky's a wool-dark canopy, the moon shrouded behind clouds thick enough to muffle the stars. And yet, here you are, awake, dressed in thick woolen robes, sandaled feet padding across a floor that feels more like ice than rock. Your cell door creaks open on stiff hinges. You step out into the cloister, a long vaulted hallway lined with arches and shadows. Somewhere down the corridor, the bell continues its rhythmic toll, each strike a slow punch through the silence. It's not a friendly alarm. It's more like a cosmic demand. Time to pray. Doesn't matter if you were mid-dream, drooling into your scratchy pillow. The rule says it's time, and here, the rule is everything. You glance to your left and see Brother Thomas already hobbling ahead, face slack with sleep, candle in hand. Behind you someone coughs quietly. Brother Hugo, maybe. You fall into step, the procession silent, solemn, half asleep, but unmistakably rehearsed. You've only been here a few weeks, and already your body moves on instinct. The bell rings, your feet follow. No thought, just obedience. Inside the chapel, the air shifts. It's somehow colder, holier. The candle flames flicker against polished stone. Wooden choir stalls line both sides, narrow benches where you and the others squeeze in. You can feel the weight of the space. Centuries of prayer have worn grooves into the very walls. The floor is covered in footprints, scuffs from 1,000 sandals tracing the same nightly path. Then, silence, until a voice, soft, aged, and steady, begins the first line of the psalm. Domine, labia mea aperius. Lord, open my lips. And just like that, the service begins. You join in, chanting the Latin verses by heart. Not because you're fluent, you're not, but because you've said them every night since you arrived. The rhythm is slow, hypnotic, like waves pulling you in. You chant, you breathe, you try not to fall asleep. This is Matins, the nighttime prayer that pulls you from your dreams and drops you into the divine. To modern ears, it might seem like religious overkill. Who wakes up at 2 a.m. just to recite ancient verses in a cold church? But in the medieval monastic world, this was the holiest hour. The world was dark, silent, vulnerable. That's exactly when the devil prowled most freely, or so monks believed. And so they fought back the only way they knew how. By praying in shifts, cutting the night like bread, offering praise when no one else dared to be awake. It wasn't about being well rested, it was about being spiritually armed. Back then, time didn't run on hours, it ran on bells. Clocks were rare and unreliable. Most monasteries measured the night by dividing it into fixed intervals of divine labor, known as the canonical hours. Matins was the first. It could last an hour or more, depending on the season. In winter, longer. More darkness, more psalms. Lucky you. You squint at your neighbor. His eyes are half closed, lips moving on autopilot. It's possible he's asleep standing up. And honestly, he might be. Monks were known for drowsing devoutly, as one 12th century chronicler put it. Sleep was discouraged, but everyone knew it was inevitable. One monk even kept a stick to prop up his chin so he wouldn't slump during chanting. A holy selfie stick, if you will. You, however, are struggling. The chants are blurring. Your legs ache. Your stomach grumbles. You wonder if breakfast is soon, only to remember, no, it's hours away, and it'll be bread and maybe watery porridge. Suddenly, the service ends. Like a soft curtain dropping, you exhale. A silent line of monks begins filing out, and you follow. Not back to sleep, though, at least, not always. Some monasteries went straight into Lauds, the next round of prayer. Others allowed a brief return to rest before sunrise. It all depended on your abbot's interpretation of the rule, and his mood. Tonight, you're lucky. Back to the cell. But this return to rest feels different. You're not just sleeping. You're entering what medieval people often called the first sleep. A few hours now, followed by another bell. Then maybe a second round of sleep after that. It's a rhythm we've lost today, but back then, it was common. Even peasants and city dwellers lived by this split sleep pattern. They'd wake in the night to tend fires, pray, even chat with neighbors before drifting into their second sleep. Modern science now suggests this segmented sleep may be our natural default. Left to our own devices, no electricity, no Netflix, no scrolling through medieval TikTok. Our brains naturally fall into this two-part cycle. But monks? They institutionalized it. They didn't just wake up between two sleeps. They filled the gap with sacred work. You curl back into your straw bed. The blanket is coarse and barely covers your legs. But your mind is buzzing. You've just participated in a tradition stretching back 800 years, and you've only just begun. It's hard to describe the feeling of being constantly interrupted by bells. One moment you're asleep, the next you're being summoned to fight invisible spiritual battles. It does something to the way you perceive time. Days blur, hours don't matter. You begin to live not by sunlight or shadow, but by sound. And that sound, always the bell. Of course, not all monks handled it well. Some cracked under the strain. There are stories, half whispered, half historical, of brothers sneaking away in the night, climbing out windows just to get some sleep. Others begged their abbots for leniency. A few monasteries compromised, letting older monks rest through matins or shortening the service during plague years. But most held fast. The rule was the rule. And the rule said, wake up, even if your eyes won't open. The bell rings again. Not loud this time, just a soft, distant echo in your skull. It's only the beginning. You're not just tired. You're living inside tired. You wake up tired, pray tired, eat tired, and even your daydreams, when they happen, are just slightly different versions of you being tired in other rooms. That bell that dragged you out of sleep last night, it's not done with you. It'll ring again, and again, and again. Because here in the monastery, you don't live by hours. You live by bells. You know what time it is? Wrong. You don't. No one here talks about time like you're used to. There are no clocks, no sunrises counted in minutes, no 2:30 p.m. meetings scribbled in a planner. You have no watch, no hourglass, not even a rooster who seems particularly punctual. Instead, your whole life is carved up by sacred interruptions. 7 bells for 7 prayers a day. And at the center of it all is something called the Divine Office. The Divine Office isn't a place, it's a rhythm, a sacred beat. It's what monks chant, mumble, or whisper their way through every single day and every single night. The word office comes from the Latin officium, meaning duty or service. And that's exactly what this is. Service to God performed at precise times, regardless of what your body thinks about it. Here's the lineup of your new day. Matins, sometime between midnight and 2 a.m., depending on the season. It's the big one. Long, intense, and often sleep-defying. You've already survived this once. Lauds, just before dawn. It means praises, and yes, you're expected to do that even if your eyes are still crusted shut. Prime, around 6 a.m., when the sun starts making everything worse. Terce, mid-morning, maybe around 9 a.m., depending on the monastery's vibe. Sext, noon. It's hot, you're hungry. But hey, let's pray. None. Mid-afternoon, when all you really want is a nap and a biscuit. Vespers, sunsetish, more chanting, more incense, maybe the prettiest part of the day if you're still conscious. Compline, before bed, a final gentle whisper to heaven, assuming you haven't already passed out in your stall. Sound like a lot? That's because it is. These prayer times, called canonical hours, were designed to structure the entire monastic day. They weren't suggestions, they were sacred obligations. They also meant your sleep, your meals, your work, your private thoughts. They all bowed before the bell. Imagine this. You're finally getting into a groove with your garden work, turning over soil, the sun warming your face. You've stopped thinking about how exhausted you are. You're almost enjoying it. And then the bell rings. Terce, drop the shovel, wash your hands, find your place in the choir stall. God is calling. You might think this sounds like a productivity nightmare. But here's the twist. Monks didn't see time as something to be mastered or optimized. They didn't care about efficiency or daily output. They saw time as a gift that didn't belong to them. It was God's. Every moment you weren't praying was a moment borrowed, possibly stolen, from the divine. Now, you might be wondering, why not just pray silently in your head and call it a day? Nice try. To these monks, prayer was not optional and not private. It was communal, physical, scheduled, and vocal. Every chant was carefully timed. The Book of Psalms was their daily script, divided so precisely that in most monasteries, the entire book, all 150 psalms, was recited every single week. That's like reading the full script of The Lord of the Rings, out loud, on repeat, until you die. It's hard to wrap your modern brain around this unless you're a Gregorian chant enthusiast or someone who once read The Rule of St. Benedict just for fun. But this strict division of time wasn't just about devotion. It was about control. Control over temptation. Control over chaos. Monastic life was, above all, a disciplined resistance to the self. And nothing resists the self more brutally than the bell. Let's talk about the bell. It's not just any bell. It's not a sweet little jingle on a wind chime. It's a heavy, ironclad, mood-shattering clang that cuts through stone, wind, dreams, and every ounce of rest you thought you had left. It rings from the bell tower, rung by hand, sometimes using a rope thick as your wrist, and when it rings, you obey. Every monk, no matter how high-ranking, was expected to respond instantly to the bell. It governed every part of life. Even bathroom breaks were timed around it. One wrong choice, and you'd be sprinting from the latrine to make it to sext before the last syllable of the opening psalm. It wasn't always fun, but it did create something unexpected. Freedom. Yeah, I know. That sounds backward. How could being ruled by bells feel free? But here's the strange logic. Because you never had to decide anything about your schedule, because the bell told you when to wake, eat, pray, sleep, you didn't have to stress about what to do or when to do it. You surrendered your decisions to something higher. That, to many monks, was the most liberating thing in the world. Some historians even argue that the monastic bell system was a kind of early time technology. Long before punch clocks and meeting apps, this was a tool for organizing labor, syncing human behavior, and removing spontaneity from the equation. Whether that sounds peaceful or horrifying probably depends on how attached you are to free will. Of course, not every monk accepted it happily. There were rebels, rule benders, the sleepy-eyed brethren who learned to doze standing up or mastered the fine art of sleep praying. Yes, it's a thing. Others just tried to game the system, strategically choosing choir stalls in shadowy corners so they could sneak in a micro-nap during the longer psalms. There are even medieval complaints, handwritten on parchment, because nothing says exhausted like a 13th century passive-aggressive journal entry, about monks intentionally dragging out certain verses so others could catch a few seconds of sleep. Historians still argue, by the way, about whether this strict schedule actually improved monastic devotion or just turned everyone into spiritually repressed zombies. Some say it deepened discipline, anchoring monks in a constant rhythm of praise. Others argue it crushed individuality and created a factory of prayer-shaped exhaustion. The debate continues, but one thing's certain. No one was sleeping in. You, for example, have now been awake for roughly 7 out of the last 9 hours. You've attended matins, maybe Lord's, and definitely Prime. Your stomach is doing dramatic theatre in protest. You have 2 blisters from your sandals, and you're only halfway to lunch. So you wait, and when the bell rings again, clang, 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 you know the drill. Chant, bow, breathe. Try not to fall asleep in Psalm 95, and then back to work. You're sent to the scriptorium to copy texts by hand, Latin treatises with handwriting so fussy it makes cursive look like graffiti. Or you're ordered to weed the herb garden, barefoot, in the drizzle. All of this happens while your brain is screaming for sleep, your back is crying for a nap, and your soul is oddly calm. Because beneath the exhaustion, something strange is happening. You're getting used to it. You stop thinking about what time it is. You start thinking about what bell is next. You're not measuring your life in hours, you're measuring it in prayers. Your inner clock is being overwritten. You are being monasticized. It's not pleasant, but it's oddly comforting. Like sinking into cold water, realizing your body has no choice but to adapt. And here's the kicker. Even now, some monasteries still do this. Yes, real monks, real bells, real 2 a.m. matins. In parts of France, Italy, Mount Athos, even the US, you'll find orders that still live by the bell, still dividing their days not by appointments, but by psalms. They'll tell you it's hard, but they'll also tell you it's holy. So tonight, when your phone buzzes at 2 a.m. and you roll over in irritation, just remember that somewhere out there, someone is being dragged from a hard bed by a loud bell in a cold corridor, all to chant Psalm 51 in the dark. Not because they have to, because that's how they tell time. You are beyond tired now. Not tired like, I stayed up too late watching videos tired. This is a deeper tired, a tired that soaks into your joints, fogs your thoughts, and leaves you blinking slowly at your own hands, wondering if you're even awake. And yet, you keep moving. Because here, being tired isn't an excuse. It's part of the process. The bell rings again. Clang. And you're off, rising from your cell before your body even agrees. Every bone in your frame protests. But the rule of St. Benedict doesn't really care. Today, you're going to learn just how deep the monastic obsession with spiritual wakefulness runs. You trudge across the courtyard. It's just past dawn now. The grass crunches with frost, and your breath drifts ahead of you in little clouds. Another service waits. Lauds, the morning prayer. Your eyelids are still heavy from matins, but you've already surrendered the idea of a full night's sleep. What you haven't surrendered, yet, is the idea that sleep should feel normal. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. Because in this world, sleep is not your friend. At least, not unconditionally. Here, sleep is dangerous. Not because it makes you late for class, or because it messes with your productivity, but because it tempts you. It lures you into comfort, into the indulgence of the flesh. And for medieval monks, indulgence was a slippery slope straight into spiritual failure. They believed the night was a battleground, not metaphorically, a real battlefield where the soul wrestled with demons, distractions, lustful dreams, and the ever-creeping fog of sin. And sleep? It left you wide open. Let's pause for a moment and appreciate the intensity of that worldview. Imagine living every day with the belief that even your dreams could betray you. That simply falling asleep too comfortably, or too long, might make you vulnerable to Satan. That nodding off during prayer wasn't just rude. It was a spiritual defeat. So how did monks fight back? They engineered a lifestyle of vigilance, and I mean that literally. Every aspect of monastic design, from the stone benches in the chapel to the wooden choir stalls, was built with deliberate discomfort in mind. These weren't ergonomic prayer pods. These were spiritual pressure cookers. You've probably noticed by now that the choir stalls where you sit, read, sway and try not to collapse, are tall, narrow, and just deep enough for a man to fit while standing or sitting upright. No slouching. No dozing. You shift your weight. You ache. And during the longer services, you swear you can hear the joints in your knees weeping. And yet, the monks around you barely move. How? Because for them, resisting sleep was a holy act. To stay awake during matins wasn't just about paying attention. It was an act of spiritual defiance. A declaration that they would not be lulled into passivity, that they would fight temptation with tired eyes and hoarse voices, one verse at a time. The idea goes all the way back to early Christian desert ascetics, those wild-eyed hermits who wandered into the Egyptian wilderness to battle their inner demons. They believed that sleep opened the door to lust, distraction, even demonic visitation. One 4th century monk bragged that he hadn't lain down to sleep in 20 years. 20 years. That's not a typo. That's sleep-deprived spiritual flexing. That same ethos trickled down into monastic life across Europe. And by the time of the Benedictines and Cistercians, it had been fully institutionalized. The body was weak. The soul needed training. Sleep was part of that training. Or maybe, sleep was the enemy you learned to outmaneuver with discipline. At this point, you're beginning to realize something. Monks weren't trying to rest. They were trying to stay ready. And readiness came at a cost. Let's talk about what a full day in this mindset feels like. You start your morning with lauds. Beautiful, gentle in tone, but long. Then prime. then manual labor or spiritual reading, depending on the day. At mid-morning, you're called back for terse, then back to labor, then sext, then a meal, finally. Maybe bread, maybe broth. If it's a feast day, cheese. You'll remember the cheese. Then none, then work, then vespers, then compline, then, finally, sleep. Except, not really. Because before your first full hour of sleep has sunk into your bones, the bell rings again. Matins, and the cycle starts anew. This schedule has a name. Ora et labora. Pray and work. It sounds simple. Monastic slogans usually do. But living it? That's a different story. You don't get to prioritize rest or health or even personal reflection. You surrender to the cycle. You pray when told. You work when told. You sleep when permitted. And when you don't, you feel it. The edges of your mind start to blur. You mix up the psalms. You forget whether you've eaten. You begin to wonder, very quietly, if this is enlightenment or just religiously sanctioned sleep deprivation. Historians still argue whether monks were truly expected to be fully alert during all these hours, or whether the schedule was more of an ideal than a strict rule. Some records suggest flexibility. Others suggest enforced penalties for those caught snoozing. It probably varied by monastery, by abbot, by century. But what's clear is this. Sleep was never just sleep. It was a spiritual discipline, a sacrifice, a potential sin, and a test. You watch one of the older monks as he walks ahead of you after none. His gait is slow but steady. His eyes are sunken but clear. He's done this thousands of times, and though his body looks as worn as his robes, there's something anchored in him, something still. You wonder if maybe, just maybe, this strange schedule does something more than drain you. Because in the midst of the exhaustion, you've noticed moments. Tiny ones. A sudden silence between psalms that feels sacred. A sliver of light on the chapel floor during Lauds that makes you forget your feet are cold. A line in the Book of Hours that lands like a personal whisper. You're not dreaming, but you might be waking up to something other than sleep. You finish the last prayer of the evening. Compline. The chapel is quiet. The candles are low. You bow your head. You don't know the hour, and you don't need to. You only know one thing. The bell will ring again. And when it does, you'll rise. Because here, that's what you do. The candle flickers in your hand as you shuffle once more through the cloisters. This time, it's darker than before. Not because it's night again. It's not. The sun has technically risen. But somehow, this hour between Lauds and Prime still feels like it belongs to the dark. You press your free hand against the cold stone of the hallway as you move. It's damp. Everything is. The walls, the floors, the inside of your robes. Even your breath hangs in the air like mist. You blink, still half caught in a dream you barely remember, and for a moment you're not sure what direction you're heading. But the others are moving too, hooded shadows gliding ahead of you, their steps whisper soft on the worn flagstones. You follow. Not out of confidence, but because the only thing scarier than moving through this place alone is stopping. The chapel doors open with the familiar creak. Inside, it's cold enough to make your hands go numb on the hymn book. You blow gently on your fingers before sliding into your wooden stall. You're used to the stiffness now, the sharp corners, the way the seat creaks under your weight. These stalls aren't meant for comfort. They're meant for alertness. And frankly, you're not sure which is harder to achieve, comfort or consciousness. This morning, you feel every ache in your body, It's the kind of soreness that doesn't belong to labor. It belongs to interrupted sleep. And it's a particular type of sleep deprivation that's hard to explain unless you've lived it. Not full exhaustion, not total collapse. Just that constant, not quite rested, that hovering haze of fatigue that makes you feel like you've never fully arrived in your own body. The chanting begins. You try to keep up, but your voice is hoarse. Your mouth is dry. The words tumble from you more out of habit than intention. And still, you pray. Because in this world, silence isn't rest. It's disobedience. You mouth the next verse, then the next. And as your voice blends with the others, your mind starts to drift. Back to your cell, back to your straw mattress, back to the single warped wooden beam above your head that creaks like it's trying to lull you to sleep. But there's no rest waiting for you today. After Prime, you're assigned to clean part of the chapter house. That means hauling buckets of water from the well and scrubbing stone floors that haven't been truly dry in centuries. Your knees hit cold ground. Your fingers grip rough cloth. You pray, silently now, that you don't tip the bucket. One slip, one clang, and you'll be called out in front of everyone at dinner. Not that anyone will actually say anything. They'll just look. You finish your work and rise, knees aching. Somewhere overhead, a gull cries out. You take that as a kind of benediction. There are no windows in the chapter house. Not really. Just thin slits of light that filter through centuries-old glass. That light doesn't warm you. It barely touches you. But it's enough to show you the dust in the air. Tiny particles suspended in stillness, swirling every time you move. You feel like one of them. You pass a few other monks on your way out. Brother Philip nods slightly, face pale under his hood. You remember him from Matins last night. He was the one whose voice cracked halfway through Psalm 119. You'd wondered if he was sick. Or maybe just overtired. You're beginning to learn the difference is subtle. Out in the cloister garden, the air is different. Still cold. Still damp, but fresher. There's dirt here. Earth. Grass. It smells like rosemary and wet wood. You take it in like a man who hasn't breathed in years. A novice monk nearby is picking herbs. You almost envy him. At least he's upright. You realize your back is hunched again. You straighten, wincing, and hear something pop. The bell rings again. Sext. You groan, not outwardly, of course, just internally, deeply. That groan echoes in a part of your soul that used to enjoy weekends. You make your way back to the chapel, again. Inside, you take your place, again. You chant, again. You're starting to realize that monastery life isn't built for clarity or momentum. It's built for repetition. That's where the power is. Not in the novelty of prayer, but in its endurance. You repeat the same cycle again and again until it wears grooves into your soul. You stop praying for inspiration. You start praying for persistence. But that repetition? It does something strange. It starts to warp your sense of time. You can no longer tell if it's Wednesday or Friday, if it's been a week or a month since you arrived. Your internal calendar has been overwritten by the bells. Your dreams have shrunk to fit inside the slivers of sleep you're allowed. Your thoughts echo the verses you recite. Psalm 3, Psalm 37, Psalm 91. They don't feel like words anymore. They feel like weather patterns. And it hits you. The monks didn't build this system to fit time. They built it to defy it. By living according to the bells, they escaped the tyranny of the clock. Not in a freeing, lazy Sunday kind of way, but in a disciplined, almost militant one. They lived like time didn't own them, because they believed it belonged to God. There's a fringe theory you once heard from a medievalist, someone who spent way too long studying handwritten manuscripts and probably didn't sleep much either. She argued that the monastic day wasn't just a schedule, it was a spiritual time machine, that by dividing their lives into hours of prayer, monks tried to step out of earthly time altogether. It sounds extreme. Maybe it is. But when you're standing in the chapel during none, eyes half shut, body humming with fatigue, it feels plausible. Like maybe, just maybe, you've slipped into a different kind of time. One that loops and folds and chants its way back to the beginning every single day. Historians still argue, she'd said, whether these schedules helped monks transcend time, or whether they just wore them down until they couldn't tell the difference. You're beginning to understand what she meant. Back in your cell, you sit on the edge of your straw mattress. It's still not soft. It never will be. You rest your elbows on your knees, your hands cupped around nothing in particular. You stay there, suspended. You're not thinking about food, or comfort, or even sleep. You're thinking about the bell, because it hasn't rung yet, but it will. And when it does, you'll rise, again and again and again, until time forgets your name. Your eyes sting, not because of smoke or sunlight, but from sheer effort. You're sitting in the choir stall again, back straighter than it wants to be, lips moving through yet another psalm. You've read this one before. You've probably read it 100 times by now, but you read it again. Because here, repetition isn't lazy. It's liturgical. And as you chant the same verses again and again, something peculiar happens. You start to fade. Not completely. Not like drifting off into a proper nap. More like floating. Your mind detaches just slightly from your voice. Your body remains upright. Your lips move. Your eyes are open. But you're somewhere else. Somewhere between heaven, Latin, and deep, unrepentant exhaustion. Then the monk next to you coughs. You jolt, just barely, and your heart thuds in your chest like you've been caught committing a crime. Because you were. Sort of. You were this close to doing what countless monks before you have tried, feared, and sometimes perfected, falling asleep during prayer. You glance to your left, subtly. The monk beside you hasn't noticed. Or maybe he has, and he just remembers what it was like to be new here. Either way, he keeps chanting. You keep chanting too. But now you're more aware than ever that sleep itself, is a threat inside the chapel. It's not just something you lose. It's something you must resist. This is the peculiar paradox of monastic life. Monks are perpetually exhausted, and yet expected to stay alert. They pray in the middle of the night, eat plain food with minimal calories, do physical labor every day, and sleep in short, uncomfortable bursts. Yet during matins, lauds, and vespers, they're meant to be awake in every sense, eyes open, voice strong, soul tuned to heaven. You glance around the chapel. It's a familiar sight now. Bowed heads, swaying bodies, the occasional crack of a knee joint as someone shifts their weight. You know, without anyone having to say it, that most of them are half asleep right now. But here's the thing. They're doing it anyway. Welcome to the strange, unspoken ritual of snoozing between psalms. It's not officially sanctioned, of course. The rule of St. Benedict doesn't have a chapter titled How to Nap Without Getting Caught. But the lived reality? Monks got tired, really tired. And somewhere between Psalm 67 and Psalm 88, it wasn't uncommon for heads to dip, voices to trail off, and eyes to shut for a second too long. Some monasteries built their stalls with misericords, small ledges beneath the folding seats, designed to support a monk's backside while standing during long prayers. Helpful, right? Maybe even merciful. But they weren't designed for comfort. If anything, They were there to keep you upright just enough that you didn't collapse entirely. Even so, monks got creative. There are medieval records, actual complaints written down by frustrated abbots about brothers falling asleep mid-service. One manuscript from the 12th century even suggests that some monks developed the ability to chant while dozing, like religious autopilot, lips moving, brain snoozing, soul hopefully somewhere in between. You're skeptical. Then you look at Brother Gerard, 2 stalls down, eyes completely shut, head gently bobbing with every verse, and yet somehow perfectly in time with the chant. Okay, maybe it's real. But this practice raised serious spiritual concerns. Was it worse to fall asleep in chapel, or to skip the service entirely? Were you still praying if your body was there, but your mind had wandered into a dream about sheep? Literal sheep. You heard one monk mutter about them during Lent. Theological minds wrestled with this. Historians still argue, some of them wrote, whether dozing in the choir was a forgivable weakness or a dangerous descent into sloth. After all, monks were human, and sleep wasn't sin, not inherently. But losing vigilance, that was the tricky part. So some abbots instituted vigil checks, literal walkthroughs during night prayers to ensure everyone was still upright and conscious. Others placed young monks near older ones, hoping the energy of youth might keep the elders awake. Spoiler, it didn't. Some even installed bells within bells, smaller chimes to ring during prayer if things started getting too quiet. You might think this was excessive, but when your spiritual mission is constant readiness, there's no such thing as just resting your eyes. Still, even within this strict system, small moments of humanity slipped through. A knowing glance from a fellow brother when someone snored mid-psalm. A stifled chuckle when a monk startled himself awake. Quiet kindness in the form of a nudge, gentle, not scolding. These weren't rebellious monks, just real ones, trying to keep their eyes open, trying to stay on the path, trying not to drool on their hymnals. You, of course, are right there with them. After prayer, the bell rings again, this time for work. You're assigned to the refectory, scrubbing wooden tables worn smooth by generations of elbows and crumbs. As you wash, your mind still lingers on the chapel. You wonder how many monks before you have fallen asleep right where you stood. How many whispered prayers became soft snores. How many spiritual warriors secretly counted the seconds until compline so they could finally collapse, guilt-free. And yet, they kept doing it. Not because they were perfect, but because they believed the effort mattered. Even if you were half asleep, even if your chant cracked, even if you forgot the middle verse and had to fake your way back in. The effort was the prayer. That idea sticks with you as you dry your hands. You step into the corridor, hear the next bell, and turn back toward the chapel. The sky outside has dimmed just a little. Not quite twilight, but close. The day is slipping, as days do, and inside you, something stirs. A strange peace. Not comfort, never comfort, but a quiet sense of belonging. You're exhausted, yes, but not lost. Because even when your eyes droop, even when you sway between psalms, even when you forget where you are in the chant, you're still here, and the bells will keep ringing. You finally settle into your cell after compline, the last prayer of the evening. It's dark now, not just outside, but in your bones. The kind of deep, ancient darkness that feels older than sleep itself. You lie down on your straw mattress and pull the rough blanket up to your chin. The stone wall at your back radiates cold. The tiny window above you barely frames a star. For a moment, it's quiet. And then a new sound stirs. Your own breathing. steady, shallow, your chest rising and falling beneath the heavy wool. Your limbs relax, your jaw loosens. Your eyes blink slower and slower. You begin to drift. You're not aiming for 8 hours of sleep. No one here is. That idea, modern, luxurious, laughable, doesn't exist in the monastery. Here, sleep is parceled out in bits and slivers. And tonight, if all goes well, you'll get something very strange. First, sleep. It begins like any other. That slow, sinking feeling, like being drawn underwater. But then, only a few hours later, you'll wake again. Fully, naturally. Not because of a dream or a bad back, but because your body has decided it's time to be awake in the middle of the night. Which is weird, right? It shouldn't be. Turns out, it might actually be your brain's default setting. Back in the Middle Ages, this pattern was perfectly normal. People all over Europe, and beyond, didn't sleep in one uninterrupted block. They had a biphasic sleep cycle, a first sleep from around sunset until midnight or a bit after, followed by a waking period of an hour or two, then a second sleep until dawn. And what did they do during that in-between time? A little of everything. They prayed. They read scripture. They tended the fire. Some had conversations. Others just lay in bed and thought. One 15th century text casually mentions first sleep, as if everyone knew what that meant. Because they did. So when you, newly minted monk, lie down at night and wake again 2 hours later for matins, you're not being forced into some unnatural pattern. You're tapping into something ancient, something human, something deeply forgotten in the world of light bulbs, caffeine, and 2 a.m. scrolling. Here's the kicker. Modern sleep scientists only rediscovered this concept in the 1990s. A researcher named Thomas Ware experimented by keeping people in complete darkness for 14 hours a day. After a few weeks, they all started sleeping in 2 chunks. Naturally. First, sleep. Wakeful period. Second, sleep. And monks? They were living that reality every single day. It makes you think, maybe the monastic schedule wasn't entirely about spiritual suffering. Maybe it was about tuning into something biologically hardwired. Something we've since paved over with artificial light and productivity culture. Of course, the monastery didn't leave this to chance. The bell would still wake you for matins. But even if it didn't, your body probably would. There's something almost mystical about the time between first and second sleep. Medieval folks called it the watch, a period of quiet consciousness, where the world was silent and the spirit could listen. Some said it was the best time for prayer. Others swore it was when dreams spoke truths. A few even claimed visions from angels came more clearly then, when the soul hovered between 2 halves of night. You lie in bed, trying to stay still, but your mind has already begun to swim. Thoughts drift to the day ahead, to the verses you'll chant, to the cold stone that will meet your knees again and again. And then, the bell. You sit up instantly, not out of discipline, just reflex. Like someone tugged a string deep inside your chest. You light your candle, slide into your robe, and join the other shadows in the hallway. Matins again. But this time, it feels different. It feels timed, aligned. You remember what one historian wrote. The night was not a void in the medieval world. It was a structured, spiritual terrain. You reach the chapel, take your place, and begin. You chant, slowly, carefully. The verses fall into the dark like pebbles into a well. Some monks look more alert than usual. Others are clearly still fighting sleep. One's leaning against the stall a little too hard, and his chant has slipped into something closer to humming. But no one scolds him. Everyone understands. Because in this moment between sleeps, you're not just keeping a schedule, you're keeping vigil. There's a difference. Vigil means wakefulness with purpose. It's not just being awake, it's choosing to be. And in the monastic world, this middle-of-the-night alertness was considered sacred time. The kind of time that doesn't really exist once the sun comes up and the world starts shouting. It's quiet, still, uncluttered. You don't feel entirely human in this space. Not in a bad way. More like something liminal, something between earthly and spiritual, something outside the ticking, tyrannical clock. And when the service ends, when you return to your bed, you know you're not done. Not forever. Just until second sleep. You lie back down, and you do fall asleep again, almost immediately. But this time, it's deeper, heavier, as if your body now trusts the rhythm, as if your spirit understands what it's doing here. In this ancient cycle of rest, wake, pray, rest again. And the next morning, when you wake once more for Lauds, you notice something surprising. You're tired, but not broken. You're sore, but not bitter. You've survived the night, and not just any night. A monastic night. 2 sleeps, 1 vigil. No coffee, no scrolling. Just you, a candle, a bell, and the stillness of a world before electricity. You sit on the edge of your bed, stretch your arms, and whisper the first words of the morning prayer. You're not fully awake yet, but somehow you're more awake than you've ever been. You wake with a start, the chill of the stone floor biting through your thin socks. The candle's been reduced to a stub, flickering like a dying heartbeat. You can't quite shake the weariness lodged deep inside your bones, that heavy weight that sleep seems unwilling to lift. But today is different. Today, your exhaustion carries a meaning beyond just being tired. It's part of a sacred battle, a spiritual war waged not with swords or shields, but with eyes wide open and prayers whispered in the dark. You remember the words of the Rule, the ancient manual written by Saint Benedict over a millennium ago. Let all things be done for edification. This wasn't just a call to work hard or pray hard. It was a call to fight sin itself, to resist the lure of comfort and temptation at every turn. Sleep, while necessary, was also suspect. It was the enemy of vigilance, the weak spot where evil could creep in. The monks believed their souls were constantly under siege. Every yawn, every nodding head, every blink slipping into slumber was a vulnerability. So they turned the struggle against sleep into a spiritual exercise. Staying awake became a form of prayer, a form of resistance. To remain watchful in the dead of night was to stand guard at the gates of the soul. It's a difficult concept to grasp in your modern world, where sleep is often celebrated as the ultimate self-care. But for these men, the night was a time to battle, not to rest. The absence of caffeine made it even harder. Coffee, tea, and energy drinks were centuries away. Their fuel was willpower, cold water splashed on the face, and sometimes even the shock of standing upright in the biting chill of a stone chapel. They counted on ritual, discipline, and community to keep the fatigue at bay. You glance over at Brother Anselm, whose pale face is lit only by the flickering candlelight. His hands tremble slightly, but his voice remains steady as he leads the next psalm. You wonder if he feels the same desperate need to stay alert, or if years of this regimen have numbed him to exhaustion. Probably both. This ongoing war with sleep was more than just physical. It was deeply psychological. Monks feared not only the sin of sloth, but the dreams themselves. Some saw dreams as openings through which demons might enter, sowing chaos and temptation. Others hoped for divine visions, but such experiences were always tinged with suspicion. You start to wonder, how did monks differentiate between a holy vision and a demonic trick? Historians still debate this. Some suggest elaborate dream interpretation rituals existed. Others believe many monks simply lived in a haze of uncertainty and fear about what their sleeping minds might conjure. The architecture of the monastery reflects this mindset perfectly. Hard wooden stalls, cold stone floors, drafty corridors, all designed to prevent too much comfort and encourage wakefulness. Even the layout of the building itself served as a physical reminder that sleep was not the goal. You've noticed it yourself, that cold that never quite leaves, the way shadows gather in the corners, keeping you alert and on edge, the flickering candlelight casting ghostly shapes that almost seem to move when you're not looking, the constant low drone of the bell tower reminding you there is no rest, not yet. Yet despite the hardship, there's a strange beauty here. The shared ritual binds you to something larger, older, and deeply human. There is comfort in the knowledge that you are not alone in this struggle, that every other brother is fighting the same battle, chanting the same prayers, walking the same cold halls. And when you finally do fall asleep, between your first and second sleeps, there is a kind of peace. Not the easy peace of modern comfort, but the hard-won peace of discipline and purpose. You close your eyes, the candle guttering as your breath slows. Outside, the monastery sleeps, or at least tries to. Inside, the battle continues. You wake again, cold and slightly disoriented. The faint scent of burning tallow from your candle mixes with the damp stone air, reminding you that you're still deep inside the monastery's walls. No cozy blankets, no warm coffee, no soft mattress. Just a hard wooden plank and the sharp chill of stone against your skin. You're wide awake, but that's not because of caffeine or sugar or a quick jolt of adrenaline. Nope. You're awake because your whole day is fueled by sheer willpower, stubbornness, and, honestly, a splash or two of cold water straight from the monastery's stone basin. It's morning now, or something close enough to it. You shuffle from your cell, your feet cold in worn leather sandals, muscles stiff from broken sleep. Your throat is dry, but you know there's no tea waiting for you. The monastery runs on water, bread, and a very small dose of wine during feast days. No espresso machines here. If you want to pick-me-up, you either summon mental discipline or take the occasional splash of cold water to the face, sometimes both. Sleep is still the enemy, and you can't afford to let it win. You recall that monks deliberately avoided things that would make them too comfortable or complacent. They shunned warm beds, soft pillows, and rich food. Instead, they embraced austerity. Every bit of discomfort was a tool for spiritual growth. Every bout of exhaustion was proof of their dedication. It was almost like a badge of honor. The more tired you were, the holier you appeared. Historians still debate whether this kind of self-imposed misery actually deepened monks' spirituality or simply made them cranky and burned out. There's evidence on both sides. Some monks thrived in the harsh routine, while others quietly cracked under the strain. You stumble into the refectory, where the small group of monks silently eats their breakfast. The room smells faintly of stale bread and weak ale. The silence is almost a physical presence here, broken only by the scrape of wooden bowls and the occasional cough. You take your place at the long table. You're given a small piece of dry bread and a cup of watered-down wine. There's no sugar, no spice, just the bare essentials. It's not a meal that comforts. It's a meal that fuels the next few hours of work and prayer. After eating, you head to the chapter house, where you'll spend time copying manuscripts or studying scripture by candlelight. Your fingers ache from yesterday's labor, but you keep going. The monks believe that manual work is a form of prayer, a way to humble the body and focus the mind. Sometimes you catch yourself drifting. Your eyes glaze over the ancient Latin text, Your mind slips into daydreams. You shake your head to stay present. There's no room for distraction here. Instead, you focus on the bell. The bell that dictates everything. The bell that decides when you eat, pray, work, and yes, when you try to sleep. You realize this constant schedule, driven by sound rather than sight or clock, is a form of mind control. But it's voluntary. You've handed yourself over to it. The bell doesn't just regulate your actions, it shapes your entire mental state. It rewires your brain to respond automatically, to surrender control. It's fascinating, and a little terrifying. You wonder how many monks lost themselves in this cycle. How many forgot who they were outside the monastery walls. How many quietly questioned if the endless rhythm of bells and prayers was holy, or just a slow form of madness. There's a reason that many monasteries had rules about isolation, not just to keep monks focused, but because too much solitude and sleep deprivation could drive a man to despair, or worse. You remember a story about a monk who snapped from the relentless schedule, wandering the halls at night, muttering prayers and curses alike. Some say he saw demons. Others say he was just exhausted beyond endurance. Either way, his breakdown was a warning. But back to your day. The bell clangs again. It's time for sext. You rise, muscles protesting, and prepare to chant once more. Your voice is hoarse but steady. You don't really know if you're awake or just moving on habit. The bell is relentless, the schedule unyielding. And you? You keep going, because this is monastic life. No caffeine, no shortcuts, just cold water, stiff joints, and a stubborn will to stay awake. You settle into the choir stall, the familiar rough wood pressing against your back, trying not to slouch as the cold air nips at your exposed wrists. You feel every ache in your body, every dull throb from yesterday's labors, and every tingle of sleep's persistent temptation. But sitting upright, barely supported by a small misericord, isn't easy, especially when the chants drag on and the night drags longer than your willpower can hold. You're not alone in this struggle. Around you, monks nod off briefly, their heads dipping forward or sideways, only to jerk awake as a bell rings or a fellow brother coughs. Some have mastered the art of sleeping upright, eyes half open, lips moving in quiet prayer, but still caught somewhere between wakefulness and dreams. Sleep in the choir stalls was, for many monks, a battle fought inch by inch. The stalls themselves tell a story. Misericords, those tiny ledges under the folding seats, weren't designed for comfort, but for support, just enough to allow a monk to rest the weight of his body while standing, preserving the appearance of alertness. They helped keep the brothers on their feet during the long offices. Without them, fatigue might have overwhelmed more of them. But even with misericords, many monks struggled. The stone floors, drafty walls, and long hours conspired to make exhaustion a constant companion. You recall that these stalls were built intentionally harsh to discourage the comfort that might invite sloth or daydreaming. Monks knew that sleeping too much or too deeply was dangerous, not only to the body, but to the soul. Falling asleep during prayer was considered a serious lapse in discipline, potentially opening the door to temptation or sin. You glance over at Brother Benedict, who's visibly fighting to keep his eyes open, his lips barely moving as the psalms roll on. You can almost see the battle in his face. Then there's the whispered stories, fringe tales you heard whispered late at night, about monks who actually dreamed while chanting. The idea that some could enter a state of near sleep, but still chant on, their voices rising and falling on autopilot, is both amusing and eerie. Historians still argue whether this was a rare talent, or just a poetic exaggeration of medieval exhaustion. But regardless, it speaks to the extremes monks pushed themselves to maintain vigilance. Your own eyes begin to blur. Your mind flits between the Latin words and memories of home. You remember your mother's kitchen, the warm scent of baking bread, the softness of your own bed. But the chant pulls you back. You focus on the rhythm, the collective voice, the sound of stone walls vibrating with centuries of devotion. Sometimes you catch a glimpse of humor beneath the austerity. There are old accounts of monks accidentally nodding off so hard they fell out of their stalls, or softly snoring through parts of the service, only to be gently nudged awake. The abbots had to remind the brothers, no sleeping in choir, but they also understood the human limits. And so, a sort of unspoken tolerance grew. As long as you didn't fully collapse, a brief doze was forgiven. It was the struggle, after all, that counted. You shift your weight again, trying not to creak. The next bell is still minutes away, but your body is already begging for rest. The chapel feels like a slow-motion battlefield, where fatigue and faith clash, quietly but persistently. When the service finally ends, you let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. Your legs feel like jelly as you stand. The cold air outside the chapel is sharper now, but the relief of movement is welcome. You stumble back to your cell, the echoes of chanting still ringing in your ears. Your straw mattress waits, but you hesitate. It's not yet time for sleep. Soon, yes, but not yet. Because in this strange monastic world, sleeping upright in choir stalls isn't just about staying awake. It's about a sacred alertness, a spiritual readiness that never fully lets you rest. And as you lie down later, knowing the bell will pull you up again, you realize something profound. This isn't just sleep deprivation. It's a ritual, a sacrifice, a strange, exhausting way to stay close to something larger than yourself. You close your eyes, the cold pressing in, and whisper a prayer, not for rest, but for strength. The moment you open your eyes, your heart is pounding so loudly it feels as though the whole chapel might hear it. Your breath catches, shallow and quick, a sharp contrast to the stillness of the night around you. For a split second, you are lost between two worlds, the dim chapel cloaked in shadows, and the hazy realm of your dream where reality and imagination twist together. The cold stone beneath your fingertips grounds you, but your mind is spinning, caught in the aftershock of what just passed behind closed lids. You weren't just dreaming. No, this felt different. It felt real. A vivid vision burning in your memory with the intensity of something divine and terrifying all at once. The face, the voice, the flickering light. It all lingers, elusive yet impossible to shake. You try to steady your breathing, feeling the rough fabric of your robe against your skin and the faint chill of candle wax in the air. The monastery is silent, except for the distant, steady tolling of the bell, like a heartbeat in the darkness. But inside you, your pulse races with questions. Was that apparition a blessing or a warning? A holy message, or a demonic trap? For medieval monks, dreams weren't fleeting, meaningless flights of fancy. They were windows into the spiritual battlefield raging within and beyond. The night was a liminal space where the soul hovered precariously between God's light and the devil's shadow. A dream might carry a prophecy, a lesson, or a temptation designed to lead the unwary astray. You recall how monks debated these mysteries with grave seriousness. Some treated dreams as sacred gifts, holy visions that illuminated the path toward salvation. Others feared dreams as snares, false lights crafted by demons to confuse and corrupt. The same vision might be read in vastly different ways by different brothers, depending on their experience, piety, or fear. The monastery held an uneasy relationship with sleep itself. While essential for the body, it was a vulnerability of the soul. To fall too deeply or comfortably asleep was to open a door to temptation. The cloisters were filled with stories of nocturnal visitations, both angelic and demonic, that tested the faith of even the most steadfast. You run your hand over the worn wood of the choir stall, still feeling the tremor in your fingers. The imagery from your dream flashes again. A figure shrouded in shadow, eyes glowing with unnatural light, whispering riddles that twist and turn like a serpent's coil. Was it an angel guarding your soul, or a demon weaving deceit? Some monks kept journals of their dreams, scribbling cryptic notes in margins of prayer books or dedicated volumes called dream books. These were not casual diaries, but tools of spiritual vigilance. Each dream was dissected and debated, sometimes even brought before the abbot or elder monks for interpretation. The goal was to discern truth from illusion, holiness from heresy, light from darkness. In some monasteries, monks practiced what could almost be called spiritual dream therapy, sharing dreams during quiet hours, comparing visions, seeking counsel to guard against demonic influence. It was a delicate and deeply personal practice, revealing the vulnerability behind the outward discipline. The sheer intensity of these nightly battles with the unseen was staggering. Your own dream feels like a drop in an ocean of such experiences. You imagine the countless monks who, through the centuries, have lain awake, eyes flickering open from disturbing visions, wrestling with fear and faith in equal measure. Your muscles tense as the bell sounds again, pulling you from reflection back into ritual. You rise, your movements slow but purposeful. The chant resumes, soft at first, then swelling, as voices join together in a chorus of praise and supplication. You force your voice steady, your lips shaping words in Latin you know by heart, but feel disconnected from your tired mind. The tension between body and spirit is palpable. Your limbs ache for rest, your mind fights fatigue. Yet your soul is caught in this timeless struggle of vigilance. Sleep remains both a necessity and a peril, a boundary you constantly navigate. You glance around the chapel. Others sit or kneel, faces etched with exhaustion, yet bright with determination. Some eyes betray sleepless nights. Others reflect moments caught between wakefulness and dreams. You sense the silent solidarity of shared struggle, the unspoken understanding that this is more than prayer. It is spiritual warfare. The night deepens. The candle flames flicker low, shadows stretch and warp, and you find your thoughts drifting back to your dream's haunting imagery. What did it mean? Was it a warning, an omen, or just the tired mind's trick? You realize that in this ancient world, uncertainty is the only certainty. Faith isn't the absence of doubt, but the courage to face it. To rise each night, despite fear and weariness, and answer the call to vigilance. The monastery, with its stone walls and echoing bells, becomes a place where sleep, dreams, and faith intertwine in complex, profound ways. Every night is a test, every awakening a victory. You settle deeper into your prayer, feeling the fragile balance between body and spirit. Your breath slows, the pulse steadies, and for a moment, the unsettling dream recedes into the quiet sanctuary of your soul. But you know the struggle will return, as will the bell, because this is the strange, shadowed world where monks live every day. A world where the line between waking and dreaming blurs, and every moment is a battle for the soul. And you face it with eyes wide open. You trudge through the monastery's cold stone corridors, the soles of your worn sandals whispering softly against the flagstones. Each step feels heavier than the last, as if the very air itself has grown thick and sluggish, weighing down your limbs and clouding your mind. Your eyelids droop despite your best effort to keep them wide, as if they carry invisible chains, pulling you back into sleep you can't quite reach. You're exhausted, not just physically, but in a way that seems to seep deeper, into the very marrow of your bones, and into the quiet corners of your soul. It's almost as if the weariness is part of the air itself here, mixing with the faint scent of beeswax candles and old parchment, mingling with the dust motes that dance lazily in shafts of cold sunlight slipping through the narrow stained glass windows. The faint sound of chanting echoes down the halls, brothers murmuring prayers, their voices blending into a low hum, as rhythmic and steady as the tolling of distant bells. You realize that here, fatigue isn't just a byproduct of monastic life. It's a badge of honor. The less you sleep, the more pious you are. The more exhausted your eyes look, the more visible your devotion. Red rims around the eyes aren't signs of illness or weakness. They're proof that you're sacrificing bodily comfort in service of your soul. This isn't some strange, isolated practice. It's a well-known paradox of medieval monasticism. Chronic sleep deprivation was a form of holiness. You think back to your first nights here, waking abruptly to bells tolling deep into the darkness, stumbling through frozen corridors to chant prayers that seemed to stretch forever. Back then, you thought surely no one could survive such relentless wakefulness. But here you are, still standing, still breathing, still chanting. The monks you pass look as exhausted as you feel, some leaning heavily on worn wooden pillars, others gripping the edges of stone benches like lifelines. Their voices are steady, but their faces betray the toll. Sunken cheeks, pallid skin, the quiet tremble of tired hands. You recognize the signs. These men have pushed their bodies and minds to the brink. Stories of such relentless endurance swirl through the monastery like whispered legends. Tales of brothers who chanted through the night, who labored in the gardens and scriptoriums by day, and who collapsed only into brief, uncomfortable bursts of sleep on hard wooden planks. Their exhaustion was a measure of faithfulness, a living sacrifice made not in blood, but in bone-deep weariness. You've heard of monks who boasted of going without sleep for days, surviving on sheer willpower and prayer. One monk famously claimed to have spent 20 years without ever lying down to rest, standing in constant vigilance against temptation. Whether true or not, such stories spread as badges of honor, inspiring awe and fear alike. But the human body has its limits. You watch Brother Eustace leaning heavily against a window, his eyes glazed, but his voice unwavering as he recites the Psalms. You wonder how long he can hold on before his knees buckle or his mind drifts into the oblivion that tempts every weary monk. His trembling hands betray the silent battle raging within. You realize that exhaustion here is a double-edged sword, both revered and dangerous. Too much weariness, and the soul risks slipping into despair or madness. Too little, and the spirit might be accused of sloth, of weakness, of failing the sacred cause. Historians still debate this delicate balance. Some argue that glorifying exhaustion helped monks deepen their devotion, refining their discipline and sharpening their spiritual focus. Others contend it pushed many to the edge of physical and mental collapse, making them more vulnerable to illness, breakdown, and even death. You wonder how many monks before you lost themselves in this relentless pursuit of sanctity. How many walked these halls as shadows of their former selves, torn between holy devotion and human frailty. And yet, amid the sea of tired faces and whispered prayers, there's something quietly inspiring. Despite the hardship, these men carry on. Their exhaustion isn't surrender. It's commitment. A shared sacrifice that binds them beyond words, beyond personal suffering, into something larger than themselves. You start to understand. For medieval monks, the battle against sleep was more than a test of discipline. It was a core part of their identity. The fight to stay awake wasn't just about following a schedule. It was about embodying their faith in every breath, every step, every waking moment. You pause, letting your gaze wander over the muted colors of the chapel's stained glass windows. The soft light filters in, casting kaleidoscopes of reds, blues and golds onto the cold stone floor. It's a quiet beauty, centuries old, layered with prayers whispered in hope and exhaustion. Exhaustion here isn't a mere physical state, it's a form of holiness. And in this strange, sleepless world of stone walls and sacred bells, it means everything. You close your eyes briefly, feeling the ache in your muscles and the weight of your devotion settle together like dust on ancient books. You're a small part of a vast continuum, an endless chain of souls who have risen before dawn, who have battled sleep and temptation in equal measure, who have found meaning in the struggle itself. And as you stand in the silence between prayers, you know that your exhaustion is not the end. It's a beginning, a testimony, a whispered prayer carried on through the ages. The monastery breathes around you, its stones heavy with history, its bells ringing deep into the night. And you breathe with it, wearied but unbroken, dedicated beyond measure, awake. The night falls again on the monastery, thick and silent, wrapping the stone walls in a cold embrace. Outside, the world sleeps peacefully under the moon's pale gaze, but inside these ancient walls, a different rhythm pulses. It's quieter now, less official than the echoing chants and tolling bells, but no less alive. Beneath the stern rules and whispered prayers, something else breathes in the shadows, a secret rebellion of humanity. You've been here long enough to know the rule of Saint Benedict is strict. It commands obedience, chastity, humility, and vigilance. It mandates prayer at fixed hours, fasting on certain days, and of course, the relentless battle against the comfort of sleep. The rule is a blueprint for holiness, written in iron and ink. Yet, you've also learned that human nature doesn't always bow quietly to even the most sacred laws. Whispers drift through the monastery like a soft wind stirring autumn leaves. Stories of monks who don't quite follow the schedule to the letter, who find tiny loopholes in the armor of discipline. Small moments of defiance that aren't loud or violent, but persistent, subtle, and deeply human. There's Brother Giles, for instance, a man whose sly grin and twinkling eyes hint at a mischievous soul beneath his humble robes. You've heard the tales, some true, some perhaps embellished by the passing of time, of his legendary midnight escapades. In particular, the story of his midnight cheese has become a quiet legend among the brothers. Imagine it, the abbey wrapped in darkness, everyone else deep in prayer or sleep. Giles sneaks quietly through the cloisters, the faint rustle of his robes masked by the distant ringing of bells. He slips behind the altar, a place forbidden for such earthly pleasures, and pulls from a hidden nook a wedge of sharp, pungent cheese. The scent alone is bold, a rich, daring contrast to the bland bread and thin broth that make up most meals. He savors a small bite, the creamy sharpness exploding on his tongue. It's not just food. It's a secret act of rebellion, a stolen joy in a life otherwise governed by discipline and denial. You smile just thinking about it, picturing his conspiratorial grin as he sneaks back to his cell, his heart light with the small victory of earthly pleasure. But this midnight cheese isn't just about indulgence, it's about survival. Hunger is a constant companion in monastic life. Fasting is sacred, yes, but the body still demands fuel. And when meals are sparse and monotonous, these stolen moments become lifelines. A bite of cheese, a crust of bread hidden away, a stolen sip of ale, each one a whispered assertion of humanity in a world that demands you be more than human. You've seen the tension firsthand between the austere ideal and the messy reality. The abbot's stern commands ring in the dining hall. Obedience above all. Yet the furtive glances, the subtle passing of small morsels under the table, tell a different story. There is no official allowance for midnight snacks, but no one can pretend they don't happen. Some abbots crack down hard, punishing any perceived indulgence with penance or silence. Others turn a blind eye, recognizing the delicate balance between discipline and despair. After all, a hungry, sleep-deprived monk is not a productive or holy monk. Historians still debate how widespread these midnight rebellions truly were. Were they rare slips, forgiven out of compassion? Or were they common enough to form an unofficial part of monastic life? Some scholars argue that these acts were clever survival tactics, necessary for sustaining the monks' bodies and spirits. Others see them as signs of spiritual weakness or failure. The truth, as always, probably lies somewhere in between. You wander past the cold kitchen, its hearth long cold now, but the faint lingering scent of aged cheese and herbs lingers in the air like a ghost. It's a smell that brings warmth to the heart, a reminder that even in the harshest places, life finds a way to bloom. You think about Brother Giles and his midnight cheese. Maybe he's not just a rebel, but a pioneer of self-care. A reminder that devotion and humanity aren't mutually exclusive. That small pleasures, carefully hidden, can sustain a soul just as surely as prayer. These stolen moments are a lifeline, a way to reclaim a sliver of freedom amid relentless routine. A tiny spark of joy in a world otherwise defined by sacrifice. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Monastic life isn't just about discipline or suffering. It's about balance, between the divine and the human, between austerity and indulgence, between vigilance and rest. Brother Giles's midnight cheese is more than a snack. It's a symbol, a secret handshake among weary souls who refuse to be reduced to mere automatons. Because even saints need moments of grace, and sometimes that grace comes in the form of midnight cheese. You pause in the corridor, breathing in the faint aroma one last time before slipping back into the shadows. The bells will ring again soon, calling you back to prayer and vigilance. But for now, you carry the warmth of rebellion tucked quietly in your heart. A small comfort for the long, strange night ahead. The bell clangs again, a deep, resonant sound that seems to shake the very air around you. It ripples through the stone corridors, bounces off the vaulted ceilings, and settles deep inside your chest. You don't need to glance at any timepiece because you no longer measure your existence by hours or minutes, only by the bell's toll. It isn't just a call to prayer. It's the rhythm of your life, the heartbeat of the monastery itself. The bell commands you like an unseen master, an omnipresent force that orchestrates every movement, every breath, every thought. You find it impossible to resist. Your body reacts before your mind even registers the sound. Your feet move you forward. Your hands fold in prayer. Your lips part to chant verses almost automatically. It's as if the bell has rewired your very being, embedding itself into your nervous system and making obedience your default state. This phenomenon isn't just your imagination or a quirk of habit. Historians and psychologists have studied how the relentless schedule of bell ringing conditioned medieval monks' minds. Some describe it as a form of early auditory mind control, not sinister or malicious, but profoundly effective. Imagine it. Day and night punctuated by the bell's solemn voice, each toll a signal to switch mental gears. Wake up, pray, labor, eat, sleep, repeat. The bell erased the chaos of decision-making. It replaced personal will with communal rhythm, turning individual monks into components of a greater whole. At first, this seems liberating. You no longer bear the burden of choice. Your path is laid out clearly, divided into sacred intervals dictated by sound. You are free from distraction and doubt. You surrender to the bell, finding comfort in its predictability and authority. But there's a shadow side. Because the bell doesn't just guide your actions, it shapes your very thoughts. It constrains your inner world, molding it to the monastery's needs. Personal identity melts into the collective rhythm. Autonomy diminishes as the bell's voice grows louder in your mind. You wonder, what does it feel like to live so thoroughly in tune with external sound? Does the bell free your spirit or cage it? Do you pray from devotion or because the bell demands it? Is your faith a flame you kindle or an echo you follow? These questions have sparked lively debates among historians and scholars. Some argue the bell's discipline forged deep spiritual focus, uniting monks in a powerful shared purpose. Others caution it might have suppressed individuality, creating conformity and crushing creativity. You watch the other monks, their faces calm and resigned, voices rising in synchronized chant. Their eyes are tired, their bodies weary, yet their obedience is unwavering. You feel yourself swept into this tide, less an individual, more part of a living organism pulsing with bell tones and prayers. The bells become a kind of meditation, a sonic anchor in a sea of fatigue and uncertainty. They mark time, yes, but also mental state. Each toll signals a shift, from labor to prayer, from wakefulness to rest. Your mind learns to anticipate, to relax into the routine. Over time, you notice something extraordinary. The bell's sounds seep into your subconscious, threading through your dreams and thoughts. Even when silent, the memory of their tolling lingers, an internal metronome guiding your day. This auditory conditioning shapes not just your schedule, but your identity. You are a monk in service to the bell. Your body, mind, and soul synchronized to its rhythm. It is discipline and devotion wrapped in sound. As you stand in the dim chapel, the deep ringing vibrating through the floor and into your chest, you realize the bell is more than an instrument. It is the monastery's voice, the living pulse that sustains centuries of prayer and sacrifice. Despite your exhaustion, you feel a strange peace in surrendering to this rhythm. Your worries dissolve into the sound. Your fractured thoughts align with the cadence. You become part of something larger, timeless. Yet, beneath this peace lies the quiet question that lingers in the shadows. When the bell rings, who truly moves? You or the bell? This question remains unanswered. It echoes through the halls of history as loudly as the bells themselves. But for now, you answer only with obedience. And in this surrender, find your strange freedom. The cold bites into your bones as you trudge through the labyrinthine corridors of the monastery, the stone walls closing in like ancient sentinels guarding secrets you're only beginning to understand. Your sandals make faint whispers on the flagstones, a soft percussion that punctuates the heavy silence of pre-dawn hours. Your eyelids feel like lead, the weight of uncounted nights of broken sleep pressing down relentlessly. Every muscle aches, every joint protests, but you press on, because here, stopping isn't an option. Around you, the weary forms of your fellow monks move with the same slow determination. Faces pale, eyes dull, voices hushed. They are shadows of the men who arrived eager and full of spirit, now shaped by the unyielding grind of monastic life. Some lean heavily on cold stone pillars, as if the walls themselves are their only support. Others shuffle with vacant expressions, caught somewhere between prayer and exhaustion, body moving on pure habit. You pass Brother Cuthbert, whose once sharp gaze has dulled to a glazed stare. His hands tremble as he clutches his prayer book, lips moving in soft murmurs that barely rise above a whisper. You recall stories exchanged in hushed tones, stories of monks who have been swallowed whole by the monastery's demands, their minds fraying at the edges like worn parchment. Sleep deprivation, fasting, and the harsh discipline combined into a crucible too hot for many souls to bear. There's a pervasive tension here, a fragile balance between spiritual fervor and human frailty. You've heard the old tales, whispered among novices as warnings. Tales of monks who wandered the cloisters at night, eyes wild, voices muttering prayers and curses alike, lost in a fog of exhaustion and despair. Some withdrew into silence so complete it seemed they'd left their bodies behind. Others broke down in tears or madness, their spirits buckling under the relentless pressure. One story stands out, more haunting than the rest, the tale of Brother Hugh. Once, a devout and vigorous man, Hugh's mind unraveled over months of unrelenting toil and sleepless nights. He was found pacing the halls at dawn, eyes wide but unfocused, speaking to figures no one else could see. His once steady voice cracked with every prayer, and despite the abbot's efforts, Hugh never truly returned to himself. His collapse became a somber symbol, a stark reminder of the monastery's hidden cost. Historians still debate the prevalence of such breakdowns. Were they rare tragedies, the unfortunate outliers in a sea of faithful endurance? Or were they common, hidden beneath layers of silence and sacred ritual? What is undeniable is the toll, a slow erosion of mind and body that shadowed even the most devout. As you walk, you feel this history in your own aching limbs and fogged mind. The battle against sleep, against temptation and frailty, is no mere exercise in discipline. It is a test of the very limits of humanity and faith. Every yawn you suppress, every trembling hand you steady, every blurred verse you chant is a small victory and a quiet surrender. Yet amid the exhaustion, despair and whispered fears, there remains a quiet resilience. The monks here carry on, not because they are unbreakable, but because their faith compels them forward. Their exhaustion is not a sign of defeat, but a testament to their dedication. It is the slow, steady heartbeat of a shared sacrifice, a collective vow etched into the very stones around you. You wonder how many before you have walked this narrow path, balancing devotion and fragility, faith and weariness. How many have prayed with voices cracking under strain, fought invisible battles in the silence of sleepless nights, and found fleeting moments of grace in the harsh rhythm of monastic life. The monastery is not just a place of worship. It is a crucible of endurance and humanity. It is a sanctuary where the sacred and the vulnerable coexist in a delicate, unspoken dance. Here, exhaustion becomes a language, a symbol, a sacred bond that ties generations together. You pause by a window, watching the first pale light of dawn seep into the cloister. The chill in the air is sharp, but the soft glow promises a new day. You breathe deeply, feeling the cold air fill your lungs and stir your spirit. In this moment, exhaustion feels less like a burden and more like a mantle. Heavy, yes, but also hallowed. You realize that the monastery's strange, sleepless world is not just about sacrifice. It is about survival of the body, yes, but more importantly, of the spirit. It is about forging meaning from hardship, finding community in shared struggle, and discovering grace in the quiet persistence of faith. As you step away from the window, the bells begin to toll once more, pulling you back into the eternal rhythm. You straighten your shoulders, steady your breath, and prepare to move forward. The night has been long, the path arduous, but you are not alone. In this world of stone and silence, prayer and perseverance, exhaustion is not the end. It is the beginning of something profound, and you walk it willingly. The final bell of the day tolls through the monastery's silent halls, its sonorous voice echoing far beyond these stone walls, weaving through the darkness like a thread pulling all things toward rest. You sit alone now in the chapel, the cold stone beneath you grounding you in the present moment, a gentle weight after days and nights of fragmented sleep and ceaseless prayer. The stained glass windows, dulled by centuries but still vibrant, Scatter pools of ruby, sapphire, and amber light that shimmer slowly in the dying day. Your body is exhausted, every muscle aching from the long hours spent on unforgiving benches, your back stiff from rough mats, your feet sore from sandals worn thin. Yet despite the fatigue pressing on you, your spirit feels an unexpected calm, a quiet settling, as if all the fragmented hours of prayer and wakefulness have converged into this one sacred moment of peace. You think back over your journey through this strange monastic world, the fragmented nights broken by bells and chants, the cold stone cells where sleep was elusive and rest was measured in stolen moments rather than deep hours, the cold air thick with candle smoke and whispered prayers, the long, unbroken chain of devotion stretching back centuries. This life, with all its austerity and discipline, holds a rhythm, one that has drawn generations of monks into a sacred dance of sleep, prayer, and wakefulness. It's remarkable, you realize, that some monks still keep this ancient rhythm alive even now, in a world ruled by electric lights and digital clocks. They rise at midnight, chanting psalms in voices that have echoed through the ages. They break the night with prayers that stitch time back together in fragments. They live by the bell, by the sacred clock of prayer, and in doing so, they sanctify every fragment of their day. This fractured sleep schedule is not a strange quirk or a historical footnote. It is an act of devotion, an intentional sanctification of time itself. It demands a sacrifice of bodily comfort, yes, but it offers something profound in return, a chance to inhabit time as a holy space, to make every waking moment an opportunity for communion with the divine. There is a solemn beauty here, quiet and profound. In this world of stone and silence, time bends. Sleep fragments. Vigilance becomes prayer. Exhaustion is transformed from failure into a symbol of faith. The boundary between waking and dreaming blurs into something sacred, a liminal space where the soul dances with the eternal. Perhaps in our modern lives, rushing and noisy, lost to screens and endless distractions, there is something to learn from this ancient rhythm, something about presence, about devotion, about honoring the sacredness of time itself, not as something to conquer or measure, but as something to inhabit fully. You lean back against the cold stone, eyes heavy but mind clear. The chapel breathes with the quiet weight of history, the sound of prayers whispered across centuries. The bells have fallen silent for now, and a gentle hush has settled like a soft blanket. Your breath slows. The ache in your muscles fades into the background. Your thoughts soften and scatter like leaves on a gentle wind. The fragmented hours of wakefulness give way to the promise of rest. You close your eyes and feel yourself drift, slowly and deeply, into the rest you have earned. A rest woven from centuries of discipline, sacrifice, and faith. The night's vigil ends, but the sacred rhythm continues, carried forward in the hearts of monks past, present, and future. Now, as the night deepens and your eyelids grow heavy, let us slow together. Imagine the soft flicker of candlelight, the gentle dance of shadows that play upon the ancient walls of the chapel. The cold stone beneath your fingertips no longer bites. It soothes, steady and constant, a quiet companion through the long hours of stillness. The air is cool and fragrant with faint hints of beeswax and aged parchment, wrapping you in a timeless embrace. Outside, the world has hushed, and here, inside, you are cradled by centuries of whispered prayers and enduring faith. The relentless rhythm of bells and chants has softened to a gentle heartbeat, matching the slow pulse of your own breath. The noise and chaos of the day slip away, replaced by a sacred silence that feels as deep as the night itself. Rest here is not a luxury, but a return. A homecoming to peace after the storm of discipline and devotion. You find yourself sinking into stillness, held tenderly by the collective endurance of countless souls who have come before you. The exhaustion, the sacrifice, the relentless striving, all these dissolve into a quiet grace that settles like soft earth beneath your spirit. Breathe in deeply now. Feel the calm wash over you, the tension melting away like mist beneath the morning sun. With every slow exhale, you release the weight of worry and fatigue, allowing yourself to simply be whole, rested, at peace. Even in the harshest lives, moments of grace bloom. The monks' strange sleep schedules were more than endurance. They were a testament to the human spirit's quest for meaning, for connection, for transcendence. And now, in this stillness, that same spirit is with you. As your thoughts begin to drift and your body relaxes fully, carry this peace with you beyond these walls. Let it settle softly in your heart, a gentle blessing to accompany your rest tonight and in all the nights to come. Good night. Sweet dreams.